All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending the 2021 Office of Admissions / Public Pacific Alumni Association training for our admissions callers. It is my pleasure to introduce one of my longtime colleagues here at Pacific, Keith Sampe, who is the Senior Assistant Director of Admission for the Office of Enrollment Management. Take it away, Keith.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marcia. So first off, I need to thank all of you guys for being here and then being willing to make calls on our behalf to our prospective student list. We I don't want to say sell the university, but we talk about the university a lot to our prospective students as a people campus, as a campus where the community is strong. I mean, you guys have all lived that experience. And having people other than people like myself, other than admissions counselors who for a lot of the students kind of get viewed as sales reps, to have some people who actually lived it, that's not, it's not their job to sell the school, kind of talk about their experience is a huge kind of reinforcement to the messaging that we're giving them of what their experience will be like with us on campus. So to have you guys give up your time, volunteer your time to do that, really kind of says a lot to your experience and what the university does for people. So I thank you guys in advance for that. I know making phone calls is not something that's comfortable for a lot of people these days. So I think, taking the time to do that is definitely appreciated on our end. So thank you for that. Quick update to where we are in the admissions process this year. Hopefully by the end of today, I haven't seen the notification go out yet, but we should be releasing about another 1,000 admits to our freshman class today, which should get us over 6,000 admits at this point, well on our way. Total target by the time we're all said and done should be about 8,000. So we're kind of well on our way to get to that number. Application numbers are a little bit down, but expected to be down with the pandemic and everything. So we're not really worried about the numbers being a little bit smaller. We're kind of staying on pace to where we kind of intended and planned to be. But with these smaller numbers, yield, which is the conversion from accepted to deposited, is going to be crucial for us, and your efforts are going to be a big part of that, making that happen and making that number where we want them to be. Like Marche said, she kind of sent me a list of all of your guys' names today. I will spend some time over the weekend, early next week, kind of assigning the names to people, and she'll send those out to you once I give them back to her. What you will get from me is a list of students' names, major information, where they're from, parent information, parent and step-parent information, depending on, the student. There will, on the call list you get, there will be a couple of fields that we're going to ask you to fill out after you make a call, kind of the date of the call, the call outcome, whether you talk to the student, whether you talk to the parent, whatnot, and then some notes. So if there's any questions about, things you talked about, if there's follow-ups that the admissions office needs to have, we can kind of reach out to the student on our end. On that list will be the student's admissions counselor. That is their go-to person through this process. The admissions counselor will be making routine follow-ups with them over time. So that is definitely something, if the student has any questions, parents have any questions, that's their go-to person. And if we can't answer the question, we will kind of play telephone to the person on campus who can answer that question. So that's kind of our job. And we should be their resource up until the point they walk on campus. So feel free to give that staff on the call list. It'll be called staff assignment. That's the staff member that's assigned to them in our office. So definitely feel free to give that information out to people. I am putting in a chat a link to the training document to make calls. It is very similar for those of you guys who made calls last year. I think, Marche, you're going to email this out to everybody as well. But I'm going to walk through this really quick, and I'll share this on my screen too. But I'm going to walk through this just to kind of give an overview of kind of how we see these calls going. I encourage you to have your own style if you feel like you want to have your own style. Sorry to that. But really, the phone calls are kind of split up into really kind of 3 different sections when we train our staff, when we train our students in our office to make phone calls. we really kind of have them think of the phone call as 3 sections. The first section is really kind of the opening. It's an icebreaker. It's introducing yourself, why you're calling, all those types of things. Basically basic phone etiquette type stuff. But phone calls are not something that these students are used to getting. So they're going to be weirded out by it a little bit initially. So kind of setting the table and saying why you're calling, where you got their number from, that's going to kind of put them at ease, tell them you're with the university. They've all applied, they've all been admitted, so they shouldn't be like shocked that we have their information, but they won't be expecting the call for the most part. So definitely set the table there. The second part of the call is really kind of the bulk of the meat of the interaction you have with the student. This is a time where you can talk to them about your experiences, what you liked about the university, how did what was your return on the investment. We talk to these students a lot about ROI and how a Pacific education can kind of set them up for their career. So talking about how the university did that for yourself is always going to be good talking points. Asking if they have questions, if parents have questions, that's always the time to do that. And then some kind of a closing. So, just to kind of wrap up the call, ends of phone calls are always the most awkward part of a phone call like this. So kind of, game planning a little bit what you're going to talk about as a next step for them. Kind of having a next step for them is always a nice way to end the call. Confirming their enrollment, submitting their deposit, those terms are kind of interchangeable in the admissions process. The deadline is May 1st. I did not update that year, but it's May 1st, 2021 is the date of that. To do that, they go to go.pacific.edu/admitted. That is the admitted student website. It's got all kinds of information. As a default, you can always kind of send people to that website. It'll have information for financial aid, housing, all of our admitted events, all that kind of stuff will be there. But that's also where they would confirm their enrollment. Some information here, if they have questions about financial aid, direct, email addresses for financial aid, email addresses for housing, those types of stuff. Feel free to give those out to students and families if they need it. But the big change this year is what those next steps are in terms of events. In previous years, the big next step was visit campus, come to one of our admitted student day receptions, come to our big admitted student day on campus. And obviously that isn't happening this year for obvious reasons. So what we did, we learned a lot last year when we had to make the pivot and cancel all of those events. And we got some pretty good feedback with what we offered last year in surveys and things that we did. So we kind of followed the same model of having a very robust list or set of virtual events for students. So on that admitted student page, there is a link to our admitted student events, but really starting from this week, from Monday, all the way through May 1st, every week there will be 3 to 4 different events happening for admitted students. Mondays, we have kind of set aside as major Mondays. So that's really where the bulk of the academic specific sessions are. So every academic unit, every department is hosting things on Mondays. There are a few that don't fit on those days because of scheduling with faculty and that sort of thing. For example, the conservatory is doing a major Mondays event on Friday, but they're inviting students to their solo class that all of the music majors have to do. So, but the vast majority of them will be on Mondays. Tiger's Perspective Tuesdays are going to be kind of interactions with current students, sharing their passions, things they're doing on campus. We're going to be doing a couple of Instagram live campus tours and those types of things with our student workers on campus. So that's kind of intended for them to engage with current students. Financial aid is doing a series of financial aid topics on Wednesdays, talking about everything from how do you read and interpret your financial aid package to what do you do when your financial situation changes and things need to be updated. How do the loans work? All of that kind of stuff will be covered in those financial aid Wednesdays. Campus conversations take place on Thursdays. This is where we're going to connect them with different offices on campus, or housing, campus rec, ASUOP, study abroad, all of those other types of kind of student support, career services. will be present at these campus conversations. So that's where they'll hear about all of those types of things. And then on Fridays, that's kind of reserved for parents and President Callahan to connect. He is doing a series of those on Fridays. He and our VP for enrollment, Chris Ferguson, will kind of be hosting those together. They're actually doing one right now. So those will be kind of going all the way through, like I said, May 1st. So no real big on-campus event, but a lot of smaller kind of hour-long, 45 minutes to an hour-long events going over across the next 3 months. We are also doing the virtual info sessions that we do regularly all year. So those are, information sessions from the admissions office. They should definitely be connecting with their admissions counselor, because we are all going to be doing one-on-one appointments and those types of things pretty heavily as we go through the spring and summer. So the call to action will be to visit that admitted student website, come to one of our events, and then, submit your deposit is kind of the next steps going through the ending of the college search process for them. This information toolkit, I think, for a lot of this is like, duh, you guys live this, you guys have seen this. This isn't rocket science to anybody, but a couple of reminders on how we kind of talk about things. I'm not going to dive into these too deep. You can kind of read them. Those of you guys who have made calls before kind of know this. Our faculty are passionate about giving students personal guidance. That personal interaction with faculty members is definitely something that you guys can speak to. The flexibility to kind of do your own thing and kind of create your college experience is another one for us. That's a big selling point. So whether that's double majors, whether that's research, kind of tailoring the degree plan for what you want to be doing in a career is big. And then the investment in the student, I think, is the other real big one. And the return on investment that we have. Safety is always going to pop up, so we threw that on there as well. Just a couple of talking points there on campus safety. But again, you guys have been on campus. You guys have lived that. I think just that experience is a big part of just you kind of sharing your experience will be a big part of talking about safety for them if they bring it up. Safety is one thing that I think I will caution. Safety / the Stockton conversation, I think, is something that I will kind of throw out there as be careful about how you talk about that and when you talk about that. For a lot of students, especially if you're talking to students from out of state, they might not know what Stockton's reputation is. And if you force that conversation and talk about it and kind of justify it, then you're kind of giving them an impression of, wait, it must be that bad because they're talking about it. So kind of, don't force that conversation, but if it comes up, definitely be upfront with that. So that's the document. There is, like I said, pretty straightforward. You guys have all made phone calls before in your life. It's not rocket science. Talking with Marche earlier today, I think we're going to be giving you guys 10 names each. So it's not a long list. The hardest part about making phone calls, I started my admissions career making phone calls in the admissions office as a student. We were expected to make 30 a night. So the hardest part about doing this is to get started doing it. But once you start dialing numbers, it kind of just rolls, and all of a sudden, 10 calls is done and it's kind of over. So, but the biggest challenge is actually starting. And so it shouldn't be too difficult once you get started, and we should be good. Yeah, Marche, did I miss anything that you think I should bring up and talk about? I know you're a veteran caller at this point.
Yes. Could you just explain for some people who are new, the difference in the terminology of an admitted student versus a confirmed student?
Yes, thank you for reminding me about that. So I am going to be building these call lists, prioritizing students who have not sent their deposit in yet. The biggest, I guess, bang for our buck here is students who haven't deposited yet. Having said that, this list is a living list, right? So as soon as I export this list out of our database, the data is old and a student could confirm. So I'm going to assume that the people that I send you are going to be admitted and not deposited. But between the time I run the list and send it to Marche and she gets it to you and you make the actual calls, someone might have paid a deposit, which is never a horrible thing. But for the most part, they should be accepted and not deposited yet. Once they submit their deposit, they will be in our system confirmed. So you may see on the spreadsheet, although like I said, I'm going to prioritize admitted students, but if you see someone on the spreadsheet that says confirmed on their admissions decision column, that means they submitted their deposit already. And like I said, the deposit deadline is May 1st. That's kind of a national deadline for students to make the deposit. They can deposit after that, but if they, we kind of want them to deposit by May 1st.
And we also are prioritizing legacy students. Could you explain what a legacy student is?
Yeah, so we collect legacy students based off of what they fill out on their application. So we're collecting information on parents and step parents. So on the call list, you will see a column for parent 1, parent 2, parent 3, parent 4. It'll have each parent's name, each parent's phone number and email address, if they get, depending on what the student gave us in their application. And it'll be a column of ones and zeros since it's a spreadsheet coming out of a database. But if it'll be marked as that parent is an alum or not. So we will be prioritizing the students who have a parent who is an alum. It might be any one of the 4 depending on the student situation, but that will be indicated on that spreadsheet.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen at this point. We have a small enough group where we can all stay in the same Zoom room space and see one another. I will still, my apologies for my notifications I need to turn off. All right. So we'll go now to a gallery view. You can go in the top right-hand corner typically of your computer screen and switch to a gallery view where you're able to see all of our beautiful squares here. I do have Keith's spotlighted, so it should be in the top left-hand corner or somewhere at the top of the squares for you to see. You are welcome to unmute and ask your question if you have one, or you can put it in the chat at this time. So I will open it up if anyone has any questions.
Marche, this is Simile. I've not done this before. Our Keith,
Okay.
you had said that we may talk to a student or a parent, and I was under the assumption that we were only talking to students.
The call list will be built, the call list will be built around students, although a lot of times the parent is going to be more open to talking on the phone than the student will be. It'll kind of, I think any of our veteran callers will tell you that the conversations are more, an actual back and forth conversation is more likely to happen with the parent than a student, because the student tends to hide. But if you end up calling a home phone number or whatever, if you get a parent, there is nothing wrong with talking to a parent. These are family decisions. Every year, every generation, as the kids get younger, it becomes more and more a family decision. So the parent can be just as influential as the student.
Thank you.
Yes, and I wanted to add similarly to that. When I called last year, I shared this with Keith as well. The family was so excited that I called that they put me on speakerphone, and I ended up talking to the whole family at one time. So don't be surprised if they get really excited and want everybody to be in on the call. So just be prepared that you might end up talking to everybody that's there, especially now that we're quarantining and we're kind of all together. All right, I see Barry and Alyssa both have their hands raised. So we'll start with you, Barry, and then follow with you, Alyssa.
Thanks, Marche. I'm Barry Harper, class of 66, and I'm chairman of the missions committee for the Alumni Association. So I really appreciate both Keith and Marche's help in this, and for you to volunteer. My question was, and I did this last year for the first time, so I was not able to have voice contact with any of the people I called. And so I was wondering if you have protocol on follow-up. I personally just sent each of them an email and said, if you would like to talk, I would be happy to share my story with you. Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon. I think, like I said, students are going to be they're not going to be expecting something like this happening. So they, I know me personally, if I don't recognize a phone number in my cell phone, I'm not answering it, right? So that's probably not, your experience, it probably isn't uncommon. Following up with the text, following up with the email is never a bad thing if you're willing to do that. If you're willing to connect afterwards or whatever, and kind of do a follow-up phone call, that's never going to be something we're going to complain with. I will say that a touch point's a touch point, and even especially if you send a text message or you leave a voicemail, even if you don't actually have a back and forth conversation with the student, you making the effort does something, and them seeing the fact that you did something does something. This, like, one of the characteristics of the generation is that they tend to be more passive and less upfront, face to face. So seeing the effort being made is almost as effective as actually talking to the student, because a lot of times when you do talk to the student, they don't know what to ask you anyway. But the gesture is important, and that can be very effective.
Thank you so much. Alyssa, we're going to have you go next. And then Thomas, I do see your hand raised. And I'm sorry I missed that earlier. So we'll go to Alyssa, then Thomas, and then Kevin.
Hello. So this isn't my first time, but like another person had said, last year was my first time. And they had kind of said, like, the preference is to first try to contact the student number, and then if you can't get a hold of anybody, the parent number. Is that still what you guys want us to do in this instance?
I think that's the best practice in terms of getting a hold of people. If you're willing to do that. The students probably, ideally the student is super engaged. They're the one that's going to be on campus. They're the one that's going to be living it. So that's the ideal contact person. But if it ends up being a parent, then the list that I give you is going to have the student's mobile number, and then it's going to have what they indicated as their primary number. It might be the same as their phone number. It might be different. If it's different, the assumption is that it's their home phone number. And then each parent will have their own phone number if they were given. So I would go with the student's primary phone number first, then their mobile number, and if not that, then kind of one of the parents' numbers. I think I think some of it too is up to you and who you feel more comfortable with. I mean, if you feel like you're more comfortable talking to a parent, make the effort to the student. And if not, the student doesn't answer and you feel you would rather talk to the parent,
Okay,
that's totally fine as well.
I had one other question too. Is there a particular date you would like to have us done with our list? I mean, ideally, like you said, once we get started, it'll go pretty quick, but just to kind of, sometimes due dates help people to get started a little bit earlier.
Yeah, Marcia, do you want to speak to that, or I think you have a timeline that you wanted them to.
Yes. We ideally would like the calls made by the end of March, if at all possible. The absolute deadline is mid-April, and I will send you all an email with some notes and reminders on this as well. But what we are facing this year is probably the stiffest competition we've ever had for students. And the sooner that we can get that call in and be that first school to give them that warm welcome, the better. So I would say sooner rather than later. As soon as you get your list, get started as soon as you can. Really, really try to get them done by the end of March. If that's not feasible, mid-April. All right, Thomas, if you don't mind unmuting and sharing your question, please.
Well, my question goes along with the previous ones. Since it's been so long since I was a student at UOP, I think my role would be much more effective in speaking with parents about the long-term assets of Pacific education. So, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and that's very valuable. I mean, like I said before, that it's a family decision, and for a 17-year-old, it's going to be hard for them to kind of wrap their brain around 30, 40 years down the road and how a Pacific education is going to be beneficial for them. But the parents are going to get that. So if you feel more comfortable talking to the parent, a contact with the family is a contact with the family, and that's never going to be a bad thing, because it
seems like in a lot of respects, I mean, although the students' interests are going to be primary, many times it's the parent who funds it. So, I mean, there you have it.
For sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why it's a family decision nowadays, because and it's not many times. It's basically all. I mean, college is so expensive these days that it's very hard for a student to do it on their own. So,
when I just as an aside, it has nothing to do with this. When I went to Pacific, it was $4,200 a year.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, we all have our favorite memories of getting that acceptance letter. All right, we have promised you all that we're going to try to limit this to 30 minutes. So what I'm going to offer is we're going to get through the questions in the chat as well as questions from Kevin and Matthew. And then I'm going to open it up for people who have to leave to go ahead and exit. Those that are willing to stay for a few more minutes will continue recording and answering questions. So with that, we'll move on to Kevin to ask a question, and then I will ask one from the chat, and then we'll follow up with Matthew next. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia, and putting this on. And this is my first rodeo with the admissions committee. So, you know, I need a little bit of background, I guess, on a typical question. So I was COP 1980, dental school 83. And I just wonder if you are giving any thought to the students that you're having us call, if they're in that particular area of our expertise. I mean, if you tell me there's somebody in San Diego who wants to be a dentist and go to UOP, it's a done deal. They're coming to UOP. I'll make sure that happens. But if you send me somebody from Maryland that's going to be in conservatory playing the flute, I don't have a basis to really address that as much as I would in other areas. So is there any thought to geography, major, school, etc.?
You want me to take this, Marcia? Or?
Yes, please
Okay.
do.
Yeah, so the priority coming from the admissions committee is to focus on the legacy students first. So we're gonna try to do matching based off of primarily major, but starting with the list of legacy students first. And then from there moving on. Although, like I said, we've got 6,000 admits by the time this week is over. So there should be plenty of legacies to kind of go around. And then after that list, it'll be major and then some other things. So with yourself, Kevin, as a dental student, I mean, we have plenty of pre-dent students. So I would be surprised if I ran out of pre-dent students for you to call.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great.
All right. I'm going to try to combine two questions from the chat. Before I do that, Kevin, did you have a follow-up question? I feel like I might have cut you off.
No, that's fine. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So Keith, there's some curiosity in terms of the acceptance letter. Was anything sent with it, a piece of swag or something else that we need to be aware of? And then also for those that maybe haven't been to campus in a long time or graduated a while back, is there something new about Pacific that they need to know? For example, the housing situation because of COVID, possibly people not having roommates and things like that.
Yeah, good questions. So nothing was sent in the admin packet this year. We are kind of focusing that effort on the confirmation packet. So once they submit their deposit, they'll get something there. We found last year, we sent a pretty big admissions packet last year with posters and all that kind of stuff to the admitted group, and nobody really engaged with it until they deposited. So we kind of figured, let's just wait till people deposit, to send that money to 1,000 rather than 6,000 people. So in terms of new things, I mean, the virtual tour has been revamped a little bit, so I will definitely check that out. That is on that admitted student page. In terms of housing and all of those things moving forward for next year, especially with the pandemic, we're moving forward with the assumption that things are quote unquote back to normal. With the big caveat, that things might change if things have to change. But as of now, we're kind of moving forward that things are going to be looking like they would normally.
All right, Matthew, we'll go to you, and then Selexi, if Keith's last answer didn't fully answer your question, if you could unmute and ask any other questions related to that you might have. Matthew?
Sure. I just had a quick question. I'm Matthew, by the way. Graduated from the conservatory in 2013 with my bachelor's in music education. I mainly had a question about scheduling these calls with these admitted students, and if there was any guidance that we should refer to. When I called last year, I sent some text messages out to the admitted students on my call list saying, Hi, I am an alum of University of Pacific. I'd like to spend some time with you talking about Pacific and to see what your thoughts are. If there's any guidance that Marcia or Keith can give to about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sending a text as a preempt doesn't hurt. I mean, it can be very effective for people if you're willing to do that. It yeah, I think in terms of timing, obviously evenings, I mean, avoid the school day because they're in school. With the pandemic, a lot of the rules around like when to call and when you can't engage with people kind of go out the window because nobody's doing anything anyway. It's not like Friday nights are super busy for a high school student these days. So it's not like you can't call on a weekend or something. I think just be conscious of a 17-year-old lifestyle. I mean, I wouldn't call it 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. But I think if you go late afternoons, evenings during the week, you're going to be pretty safe. I think that's as good as you can do to project those times. But yeah, doing a preemptive text is never a bad thing because then it gives you, it lets them know that the number is real and there's somebody there and why you're calling. And so when it does pop up again, that's not a bad thing.
There was a question to me about identifying CIP students. And Keith, how are we going about handling that? Do you want to respond? And for those who aren't familiar with CIP, that is our program for first-generation college students who are graduates of a Stockton high school or from Delta College.
Yeah, so I don't have a list. The list that I'm running does not pull in specifically people who have applied to the CIP program, but I am going to prioritize people. Marche's list of you guys that she sent me does have who was in the CIP program. So I will prioritize people from Stockton to those people. So that's kind of the first criteria for anyone in the CIP program. And then we'll kind of go down to major and whatnot.
And there was a question about the value of Pacific, Keith. As you know, we pride ourselves on being very relational and having faculty and staff who know our students' names, and we spend a lot of time together in person when we're able to. And in this virtual space, it's changed that dynamic a bit. So when students and their parents are weighing the value add of Pacific compared to other schools that maybe aren't known for that relational piece, what are maybe your top three? This is why Pacific is still that relational, we know our students, they know us kind of place.
So when I talk to families about that experience, I mean, hopefully in the fall, it's a non-issue and they won't have to experience a lot of it online. But I think, for those of you guys who are on campus, I mean, I know several of you guys are still connected to the university in different ways. When we moved off campus in the spring, the president drew a line in the sand and said that student experience is not going to change. So figure it out. And I think the university really did in a lot of ways. I think the number of events for students, faculty have worked their butt off, finding ways to make classes work. I think seeing the investment that some of the academic units did with shipping things home. I mean, the conservatory shipped several grand pianos to students who needed them, So there's the investment that was made to make sure that experience didn't change online was definitely there. I think all of your stories about faculty investing in you and your connection with them, while not necessarily having to do it in a pandemic, that same philosophy, that same, caring about you translates to them caring about a student in a virtual environment, and the making themselves available to you is the same thing with them making themselves available to students in a virtual environment. So I think that talking to the students that I'm connected with in our office and some of the other students around, I mean, the experience wasn't easy on anybody, but I think it was as good as it could be, I think, for people. I mean, some students dealt with it better than others, but I don't think that they really lost a ton. And I was, the part that I was concerned about was really the social component more than it was the academic component. And it really seemed like that, I mean, ASUOP Student Life did a really good job making offerings available for people. So that I was really impressed with what they did.
Yeah, so there was a request in the chat to send out an FAQ sheet to you all, a frequently asked questions sheet that might be of assistance to you. I think we can put together a few things that are very general for you. I will say that it is a different conversation depending on your major and the reasons that you're choosing Pacific. And so I can't say that there is a comprehensive FAQs that we can give you, because your conversation will be different with each family, with each individual. However, we can give you some general guidelines and I would say, how do you want to say, those moments that make Pacific unique. So for example, I will share something that Alyssa and her team at Staff Advisory Council gave Pacific staff an opportunity to do. And that was students had already been at home for most of 2020. And for the spring of 2021, we knew that they were going to spend yet another semester away from each other. And so we were given the opportunity, if we wanted to, it was voluntary, to reach out to students by email and send them a note of encouragement. And so we signed up for that. I personally signed up for students and my list was very random. I'm an English major, but I got students the first time all from pharmacy. And then the second time I signed up for a second list. I'm just that person, but I signed up for a second list of students from the Conservatory of Music. And I was able to send out a personal note to each of them. I was given a script, but you could personalize it a little bit if you liked. And I received many responses back from students thanking me for that message, really appreciative that we were thinking of them. And so those are some of the smaller things in terms of how we're trying to have that high touch experience with students. So I would say, because I will be making calls just like you all will be making calls. And I really encourage you to just share some of those moments that you've had with Pacific faculty or staff that really gave you that individualized attention. Because that's really what sets us apart in a lot of ways. It is not only the personal attention, but the way in which we go about it.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind. I mean, as you start to do these things and you get into these calls, you feel like you have to know the answer to every question, and that is not your job. You're not supposed to be able to answer every question or be able to talk about every topic that might come up. That's what the admissions office is for. So that staff assignment, that admissions counselor that they have, if you ever get to a point, which you probably will, where you're not quite sure about how to talk about something, bounce it to us, and that's what we're supposed to be able to do. And like I said, if we don't do it, then we will connect them with the faculty member or the office on campus that can talk about it. Your job as alumni are to talk about your experience and what Pacific did about you, which you should be able to do. Anything beyond that is icing on the cake in terms of providing information or doing all that kind of stuff. Your job is to be excited about the university, share your experience, and encourage them to be excited about the university. And if you do that, all of the information stuff, that's our job. We'll take care of that.
And there was a request for a copy of the script that we used. And I would say that script was very specific to staff and from a staff perspective. So I don't know how relevant it would be. But out of curiosity, if you want to know what we shared, I can certainly do that. But I don't think it's something that would be helpful to you in terms of this particular task. But I'm happy to share it with anyone who would just want to see what I sent. I don't want to speak for other people, but I can certainly show you what I sent out to students. All right, Fabian, we're going to make you our last question of the evening.
Thank you, Marcia. And Keith, thank you for putting this together. Really appreciate it. Keith, back remembering my time at Pacific, one of the things that really sold Pacific for my family was having a Spanish presentation from the admissions office. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if there's any way, being that I'm bilingual, if there's any way that I can help with some of those Spanish phone calls. I'd be more than happy to assist with those, especially as we speak to some families.
Let me think about that one. That is a great idea. I'm trying to find your name on this list so I can highlight you. I am gonna have to dig to see if I can find a good, reliable way to identify those students. But if I can, I will definitely put you on that list. Yeah.
Absolutely, be happy to help with that.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to stop recording at this moment and just say thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.